Hello and welcome to Granny's GodPod number 6, discussing who was Jesus. Please do hit the like and subscribe button, it does help. Phil Moore, in his book Straight to the Heart of Matthew, says, many people miss the fact that Jesus was a radical, dangerous revolutionary who made big waves and powerful enemies. Jesus called himself the Son of Man. In normal Jewish use, this simply meant human, but to those in the know, it was the most dangerous claim a Roman subject could make. The paranoid Emperor Tiberius killed 1/10 of the Roman nobility for fear of losing his throne. Jesus was not killed for preaching pithy parables. His doctrine was heretical, his behaviour an affront to the sacred law, and he even called the Pharisees sons of hell. He claimed to be Lord of the Sabbath, to know God as his Father and his equal. This was blasphemy according to the Jews, and highly inflammatory talk in those first century times of the Roman Empire. Jesus was tried for treason because his enemies said, anyone who claims kingship opposes Caesar. On the cross of his crucifixion, he was labelled the King of the Jews. When Jesus died, the revolution was assumed to be over. Instead, it gave us access to the Godhead, signified by the curtain in the temple being torn in two. Then after 3 days, Jesus' body disappeared, and his followers began to preach his resurrection. Not only had Jesus' death not been the end of the revolution, it was part of the plan. As Jesus had prophesied, the Second Temple of Jerusalem fell in 70 AD, and the Jewish state was dead. However, within 3 centuries, the Roman Emperor proclaimed Jesus King of Kings, and 2,000 years later, his church is found worldwide. Like many of us, Jesus has a mixed family history. He is descended from prostitutes, adulterers, and a widow from Moab, a Gentile nation judged corrupt by God. On the other hand, he is also of the seed of Abraham, the righteous patriarch that God chose to father Israel, and of the line of David, the shepherd boy chosen to found a dynasty of kings. God incarnate came down to us in a stable, not a palace. We don't know much about Jesus' early life, only that he called the temple his father's house at the age of 12. Luke tells us Jesus was baptized by John at the age of 30. The special occasion when the heavens opened and God speaks of his beloved Son, and the Holy Spirit descends in the form of a dove. Then Jesus' ministry began, and the first thing was to choose his pupils, his disciples. Perhaps surprisingly, they were not educated rabbis, but humble and sometimes flawed Galileans. Isaiah tells us Jesus was nothing to look at, yet the disciples were willing to drop everything and go with him, even Peter, who was married. The disciples witnessed Jesus' miracles and heard his pithy parables, and they asked, "What kind of man is this?" First century Palestine was a nation ruled by rich, powerful and well-educated people. The Pharisees and the Jewish people appeared devout, compared to the lowest of Jewish society, the tax collectors, prostitutes and Gentiles that Jesus knew. Jesus taught with authority, but religious leaders tried to trap him with loaded questions. Then just imagine this Jew telling other Jews, "All things have been delivered to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, Nor does anyone know the Father except the Son, and the one to whom the Son wills to reveal him. The Jews must have been so shocked. They must have thought Jesus was either arrogant in the extreme or talking like a lunatic. Accept it as truth? No way. The Jews had a false reliance on their Jewish ancestry, being the children of Abraham, and their preconceptions were strong enough to reject Jesus and plot his death, as prophesied in Isaiah and the Psalms. The Pharisees' religion was self-righteous rule-keeping, quite unlike Jesus' gospel of love, and far removed from the gospel of the Old Testament by their man-made additions. They did not realise that the way back from sin is by the gracious work of God from the inside out, not by rules and regulations that only work on the outside. When Jesus told the paralysed man his sins were forgiven, the scribes were incensed. This was blasphemy, because they believed only God could forgive sins, and this meant Jesus was claiming to be God. Under Roman oppression, the Jews had longed for a Messiah who would throw off the Roman occupation and re-establish the kingdom of Israel. They expected a revolutionary fighter like Judas Maccabeus, not the lamb to the slaughter that Isaiah describes. Instead of a rebellion, they were told to pay the taxes owed to Caesar, and if they were coerced into carrying the burden of a Roman soldier for 1 mile, they should carry it for 2. Jesus came in humility on a donkey, not as a king on horseback, not with a crown of gold but of thorns, nor with rings on his fingers but with nails through his hands. The Jews wanted him to liberate Palestine, but Jesus' kingdom was for the whole earth. When the high priest asked if he was the Christ, the Son of God, Jesus said, "You have said so, and from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of God." We cannot afford to diminish the great sacrifice Jesus made for us by dying on the cross. God the Father left us with this New Testament message. Believe in my Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as he commanded. And the greatest love we can give to others is to bring them to Jesus for their salvation. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now. See you next time. And don't forget the subscribe button.